The Seldorians had long considered themselves the apex predators of the galaxy. With skin like polished steel and eyes that glowed with a malevolent hue, they were a species forged in the fires of conquest. Each world they encountered bent to their will, its resources stripped, its inhabitants subjugated or annihilated. Earth, despite its seemingly primitive inhabitants, was no different. In their arrogance, the Seldorians viewed humans as fragile, insignificant beings. Sure, they had seen humans attempt resistance in the past, but it was laughable, pathetic, really. Every time, the humans had been crushed, their technology no match for the Seldorians' superior firepower. This time, they wouldn't even need their full fleet. The Seldorian commander Zarlash stood on the deck of his flagship, watching the small human vessel floating in the vast expanse of space. It was isolated, alone, a flicker of life in the cold void. His sharp eyes narrowed as he analyzed its structure. An easy kill, he thought. The ship appeared old, outdated by Seldorian standards, and practically defenseless. It was hardly worth the effort, but the Seldorians had grown accustomed to easy victories. There was something satisfying about reminding these lesser creatures of their place in the galaxy. Zarlash smirked. Earthlings, as always, were too naive to know when they were beaten. "We will approach from above," Zarlash said, his voice low but commanding. His crew, disciplined and efficient, moved in unison as they prepared to strike. The humans were oblivious to their presence, an oversight that would cost them dearly. Zarlash imagined the panic that would spread on the human vessel when they realized who had come for them. It was amusing in a way. No distress signal could save them now. Zarlash could almost taste victory already. The Seldorian battlecruiser was armed with state-of-the-art weaponry capable of obliterating entire fleets. Against a lone ship, it was overkill. But then again, the Seldorians always liked to make an impression. From the control room, Zarlash watched the human ship drift aimlessly, like wounded prey waiting for a predator to strike. He relished the anticipation. "Begin the attack," he ordered. His second-in-command activated the ship's main weapons system with the practiced ease of someone who had done this 100 times before. Energy cannons whirred to life, their hum growing louder as they prepared to release their devastating charge. Zarlash watched as the targeting systems locked onto the human vessel. There was no need for subtlety. This was meant to be swift, brutal, final. The cannons fired, their energy beams streaking through the void at blinding speed. The human ship barely had time to register the incoming attack. Zarlash grinned, picturing the explosion that would follow. But as the beams hit, something unexpected happened. The energy impacted the ship's shields, but instead of disintegrating, the human vessel absorbed the blast. Zarlash blinked in surprise. The energy rippled across the surface of the ship's shields, dissipating harmlessly. There was no explosion. No catastrophic failure. Just nothing. "What?" Zarlash muttered, his voice laced with disbelief. His crew, equally confused, stared at the display in silence. "Fire again," Zarlash barked, his earlier confidence now tainted with irritation. The cannons powered up once more and unleashed another volley, this time even more intense than before. But again, the same result. The human ship held its ground, its shields shimmering with an ethereal glow as they absorbed the energy. Zarlash could feel the tension in the room growing. His crew exchanged nervous glances. This wasn't supposed to happen. "Impossible," Zarlash growled, his fist slamming into the console in frustration. How could this be? The humans were supposed to be weak, their technology decades behind the Seldorians. This ship, this insignificant human vessel, should have been obliterated by now. Yet here it was, still standing. Still defying him. Zarlash's mind raced. There had to be an explanation, some trick or malfunction. But no, his systems were reading everything accurately. The human ship's shields were somehow stronger than anticipated. Zarlash's smugness faded, replaced by a growing sense of unease. He had underestimated them. Captain Maeve Larson stood at the helm of the human ship, her fingers lightly tapping the console as she watched the incoming barrage from the Seldorian cruiser. The calm that radiated from her was contagious. Around her, the crew worked efficiently, each movement precise and deliberate. There was no fear in their eyes, just focus. They had been through worse, and they were prepared for this. The Seldorians were predictable, overconfident, and that would be their downfall. "They've engaged," Larson muttered, eyes locked on the incoming energy blast. "Shields holding," came the immediate response from her tactical officer, Commander Harlow. The ship didn't even shudder under the assault. It was as though the alien weaponry was little more than a mild inconvenience. Larson smirked. The Seldorians thought they were dealing with an ordinary human vessel, and that assumption would cost them. The crew continued their work, unperturbed by the chaos outside. Communications Officer Lee monitored external frequencies, ensuring no distress signals leaked. The Seldorians couldn't know what was coming. Across the room, Engineer Torres monitored the ship's power levels. The shield was holding at 80%, but that was intentional. Let the Seldorians think they were winning. Let them believe this would be easy. "They always underestimate us," Larson said, more to herself than anyone else. Harlow chuckled softly. "It's what keeps us alive, Captain." The Seldorians had no idea what kind of ship they were dealing with. On the surface, it appeared outdated, just another relic from Earth's first wave of space exploration. But hidden beneath its modest exterior was technology decades ahead of what the Seldorians had encountered before. The shield system alone was a marvel, a prototype developed specifically for this kind of confrontation. Energy absorbers woven into the hull redirected power from incoming attacks into the ship's own weapons systems. Every shot the Seldorians fired only made the humans stronger. The Seldorian ship fired again, but this time, the energy blast was met with even less resistance. The human vessel absorbed the hit effortlessly, and its shield shimmered with a faint, almost imperceptible glow. Larson watched, her smile growing. "They're powering us up," she said, amused. The Seldorians had no idea that their own weaponry was fueling the very ship they sought to destroy. Larson nodded to Torres, who began rerouting the excess energy into their stealth systems. Within moments, the ship's sensors adjusted, and they faded from the Seldorians' radar. "Go dark," Larson ordered. The lights dimmed slightly, and for the Seldorian crew, it was as though the human vessel had simply vanished. In the darkness of space, Larson's ship repositioned itself with surgical precision. Harlow and his team had been studying Seldorian ships for months, analyzing their weaknesses, waiting for a moment like this. "Target their propulsion systems," Larson commanded, her voice steady. "No need to make it flashy, just one clean shot." Harlow's hands danced across his console, inputting coordinates and locking onto the vulnerable spot in the Seldorian ship's engine. They had studied the enemy well. The Seldorian hull, while heavily armored in most places, had critical blind spots. One was right at the base of their propulsion system, a small but catastrophic weakness. The human ship, now a ghost in space, lined up for its strike. The crew worked in silent unison. There was no need for dramatic speeches or last-minute second guesses. They knew exactly what they were doing. Larson watched the screen intently. "Fire!" The shot was silent in the vacuum of space, but its impact was devastating. The Seldorian ship rocked violently as their propulsion systems were obliterated in a single, precise strike. Sparks erupted across the control room of the Seldorian vessel. Zarlash stumbled, gripping the edge of his console. The smug confidence that had once filled the Seldorian crew evaporated in an instant, replaced by panic and confusion. "What happened?" Zarlash demanded, his voice filled with fury. His officers scrambled, checking their instruments, but the human ship had vanished from their sensors completely. "Find them!" Zarlash's frustration grew as his crew failed to detect the source of the attack. They were supposed to be the hunters, but now they were the prey. "They're gone, Commander," one of the officers stammered, his voice trembling. Zarlash could barely contain his rage. How could this be happening? They were supposed to be superior, yet here they were, crippled by a single human ship. "What is this sorcery?" Zarlash growled through clenched teeth, staring at the empty space where the human vessel had once been. In that moment, Zarlosh realized his grave miscalculation. The humans were not the weak, primitive species he had believed them to be. Their technology was far more advanced, their tactics far more cunning. And now, his ship was defenseless, crippled by an enemy he had underestimated from the start. The tables had turned, and the Seldorians, for the first time in centuries, found themselves outmatched. The Seldorian ship hung in the darkness, crippled and barely functioning. Its weapon systems were fried, and their once unbreakable shields were useless. Captain Larson watched the wreckage on her monitor, her eyes sharp and focused. The battle was all but over. The Seldorians, who had once terrorized the galaxy, now floated powerless, victims of their own arrogance. The human ship moved silently, positioning itself for the final strike. There was no need for fanfare. This wasn't about revenge, it was about survival. "Lock on to their command center," Larson said, her voice steady. Harlow adjusted the targeting systems, his fingers moving swiftly across the controls. They had outmaneuvered the Seldorians at every turn. Despite their superior numbers and firepower, the aliens had never stood a chance. Every move the humans made was calculated, precise. They didn't waste resources or energy. Larson's ship had crippled them in minutes, turning the tide of battle with tactics that the Seldorians couldn't have predicted. The human vessel fired again. This time, the shot hit the Seldorian command center, slicing through the remaining defenses like a hot knife through butter. Explosions rippled across the alien ship, and large chunks of debris floated away into the void. For a brief moment, Zarlosh's face appeared on Larson's monitor, filled with disbelief and rage. But as quickly as it appeared, the connection cut out. His ship was burning, his crew scattered, his fleet reduced to nothing more than drifting wreckage. The once mighty Seldorians were done. Larson watched in silence. There was no celebration, no cheers. The crew had done their job, and they had done it well. The wreckage that floated past them was a testament to their ingenuity, to their resilience. Harlow turned to her, waiting for the next order. "Stand down," Larson said softly. "They're finished." On the Seldorian vessel, what remained of the crew scrambled for survival. The once feared warship was now a broken husk, its pride shattered. Zarlosh, if he was still alive, had no choice but to order a retreat. His fleet, or what little was left of it, limped away from the battlefield, their superiority turned to dust. They had been so certain of victory. So certain that humans were inferior. Now they were fleeing with their tails between their legs. It would be centuries before they dared to attack another human vessel. Larson leaned back in her chair, watching as the last of the Seldorian ships disappeared into the darkness. The quiet hum of the ship filled the room. They had won. But it wasn't the technology that had won the battle, it was the people behind it. Humans had always been underestimated, seen as weaker, less advanced. And every time, they proved the galaxy wrong. They adapted. They fought back. And when it mattered most, they survived. "They always think we're weak," Larson murmured, more to herself than anyone else. Harlow raised an eyebrow, glancing at her. "What's that, Captain?" "They think it's the ships," Larson said, her gaze still fixed on the screen. "The weapons. The technology. But it's not. It's us. We survive. We fight back. We don't give up. That's what they never understand." Harlow chuckled softly. "Well, I'd say they're starting to learn." Larson smiled faintly. "Maybe. But they won't be the last to make the same mistake." The crew began returning to their stations, preparing for the next phase of their mission. The battle had been won, but there was always another challenge ahead. That was the nature of humanity, after all. Always pushing forward, always defying the odds. The Seldorians had learned that the hard way today. Others would learn it too in time. As the human ship powered down its battle systems, a calm settled over the crew. They had faced an enemy that saw them as insignificant, and had come out victorious. Not because they were the strongest, not because they had the most advanced technology, but because they refused to be beaten. In the vast expanse of space, that resilience, more than any weapon, was what made humanity truly unstoppable. Larson closed her eyes for a moment, letting the quiet surround her. They had won, yes? But it was never just about the battle. It was about survival. It was about showing the galaxy, time and time again, that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. And no matter who stood against them, they would keep fighting. They would keep surviving. And they would keep winning.